Let's get to it. Number 10. Mistletoe, the kissing plant. Imagine walking through a frozen, ancient forest. It is the dead of winter. Everything is brown, brittle, and lifeless. Everything except for one strange anomaly. High up in the barren branches of an oak tree, there is a ball of vibrant green hovering between earth and sky, refusing to die. To the ancient mind, this wasn't just a plant, it was a glitch in the matrix, a miraculous vessel of life force that thrived when the sun itself seemed to be failing. This is the parasite we now carelessly hang in our doorways to solicit awkward kisses from coworkers. But long before it was a hallmark of holiday romance, it was the center of a sacred and bloody drama. To the Celtic Druids, mistletoe was so holy that it could never touch the ground, lest its power be grounded out and lost. They harvested it in white robes using golden sickles, catching the falling boughs in white cloaks before sacrificing 2 white bulls beneath the tree. But in Norse mythology, the plant takes a darker turn. The beloved god Balder was invincible to all things on earth, stone, metal, wood, except for the overlooked mistletoe. The trickster Loki fashioned a dart from the plant and used it to assassinate the god of light, plunging the world into darkness. It was a symbol of vulnerability and ritual death long before it became a romantic loophole. So we have a parasitic plant that requires blood sacrifice and killed a Norse god. We took this symbol of death and repurposed it as a license to invade personal space. It's a classic case of history softening the edges of a sharp blade. But if you think hanging a parasite in your house is strange, wait until you see what we do with the entire tree. Number 9. The Christmas tree. Picture the absurdity of the act. You go into the wilderness, chop down a living organism that has survived the brutal cold, drag its dying corpse into your living room, and cover it in shiny debris. If you explained this to an alien, they would think you were performing a ritualistic summoning. And they wouldn't be wrong. The modern Christmas tree isn't just festive decor, it is a direct echo of pre-Christian tree worship that spans the continent of Europe. It was never about decking the halls, it was about bringing the spirit of the forest indoors, to keep it alive while the world outside froze to death. Long before Christianity swept through Germany, pagan tribes honored the Donar oak, a tree sacred to Thor. They believed the evergreen was the only thing powerful enough to resist the death grip of winter. The Romans, during Saturnalia, decorated their temples with fir trees to honor Saturn, the god of agriculture. The specific tradition we know today is often credited to 16th century devout Christians in Germany, but the DNA of the practice is undeniably pagan. They were bringing the green man, the spirit of vegetation, into the safety of the hearth. It was a sympathetic magic spell. By keeping the green alive inside, you ensured the return of spring outside. It's a beautiful thought, a defiant symbol of life in the face of darkness. But once you've dragged this massive pagan totem into your house and covered it with lights, custom dictates you must pile offerings beneath it. And that brings us to the transactional nature of the season.
Number 8. Gift giving. We all know the panic, the credit card debt, the crowded malls, the desperate search for a receipt. We tell ourselves we do it to honor the 3 wise men and their gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. But let's be honest, if we were really reenacting that biblical scene, we'd be giving each other essential oils and bullion, not gift cards and socks. The frenzied exchange of goods that defines December has almost nothing to do with Bethlehem and everything to do with ancient Rome's wildest party, where the social order was turned upside down and the wealthy were forced to pay tribute to the poor. The tradition comes straight from Saturnalia, the week-long Roman festival held in mid-December. During this time, the courts were closed, no war could be declared, and masters served their slaves at the dinner table. It was a chaotic release valve for societal pressure. Romans exchanged sigillaria, small wax dolls, and candles. It was a time of license and reversal, As Christianity absorbed the holiday, the tribute aspect evolved. The medieval church tried to tame it by linking it to St. Nicholas, a bishop known for dowries, but the mass exchange is purely Saturnalian. We are essentially paying a social tax to our friends and family to ensure good relations for the coming year. We wrap these tributes in bright paper to mask the fact that we are participating in a diluted Roman riot. But every pile of gifts needs a delivery system, and the story of the man coming down the chimney is hiding a psychedelic secret that might ruin your childhood. Number 7. Santa Claus and his flying reindeer. Close your eyes and picture Santa, a large bearded man in a red suit with white trim, flying through the sky in a sleigh pulled by reindeer. It's a whimsical image, defying all laws of physics. We accept the flying reindeer as magic, but the origins of this flight are likely pharmacological. The visual cues of the modern Santa myth, the red and white colors, the flight, the reindeer, the chimney, map with suspicious precision to the shamanic practices of the indigenous peoples of Siberia and the Arctic Circle, specifically regarding their use of a very specific, very potent mushroom. The Sami people and other Arctic groups had shamans who used the Amanita muscaria mushroom for spiritual journeys. Look at the mushroom, a bright red cap with white spots. The shamans would wear red and white robes to honor the spirit of the mushroom. These toxins are dangerous, so the shamans observed that reindeer would eat the mushrooms without dying. The reindeer's digestive system filtered out the deadly toxins but left the psychoactive compounds in their urine. The shamans would then, drink the yellow snow. The result? Vivid hallucinations of flight. Under the influence of Amanita, the shaman would feel as if he were soaring through the cosmos, often believing his reindeer spirit guides were flying with him. So the jolly old elf is likely a cultural memory of a tripping shaman, high on reindeer-processed hallucinogens, traversing the spirit realm. But once the shaman, or Santa, lands on your roof, he has to get into the house, and in the ancient world, the front door was locked, leaving only the fire.
Number 6. The Yule log. Turn on the TV in December, and you might find a channel broadcasting a burning log for 24 hours. Or maybe you eat a chocolate sponge cake rolled to look like wood. These are the cute, sanitized echoes of a heavy metal Nordic ritual. The original Yule log wasn't just a piece of firewood, it was a magical barrier, a burning guardian designed to hold back the terrifying entities that roamed the earth during the longest nights of the year. In the Norse tradition, the boundary between the living and the dead was thinnest during Yule, and you needed a serious fire to keep the monsters at bay. The original Yule log was often an entire tree dragged into the communal longhouse. The root end was placed in the hearth and it was fed into the fire slowly over the 12 days of Yule. This wasn't just for heat, it was a sacrifice to Thor and a protective ward. It was crucial that the log was lit with a fragment of the previous year's log, a literal transfer of the protective flame from one year to the next. Keeping the charred remains of the Yule log under your bed was believed to protect the house from lightning strikes and evil spirits. It was a serious, superstitious business, ensuring the sun would return and the house wouldn't be overrun by the wild hunt. The fire provided safety, but it also illuminated the home, revealing the decorations. While the tree took center stage, the specific greenery chosen to adorn the walls carried a heavy, gender-coded symbolism that has been largely forgotten. Number 5. Holly and ivy. The holly and the ivy, when they are both full grown. We sing the song assuming it's just about pretty plants, but in the pre-Christian worldview, nature was a battlefield of duality. Everything had a gender and a spiritual alignment. Decking the halls wasn't interior design, it was a way to balance the masculine and feminine energies within the home during the chaotic solstice period. The prickly holly and the clinging ivy were the yin and yang of the British winter, representing a botanical struggle for dominance that mirrored the changing seasons. Holly, with its rigid leaves, blood-red berries, and defensive spikes, was the quintessential masculine symbol. It represented the Holly King, a pagan archetype who ruled nature from the summer solstice until the winter solstice. Ivy, which is soft, clinging, and evergreen, was the feminine counterpart. Bringing them both indoors was a sympathetic magic ritual to ensure harmony between the master and mistress of the house. If you brought the holly before the ivy, the man would rule the house that year. If the ivy came first, the woman would rule. It was a domestic power struggle played out through vegetation. So the walls are decked with gender politics foliage, and the fire is roaring with a protective tree. The stage is set, but a silent house attracts spirits, so you need to make noise. You need to go door to door and sing, not to spread joy, but to threaten your neighbors for alcohol.
Number 4. Christmas carols, wassailing. We think of caroling as a wholesome activity where church groups sing Silent Night to delighted neighbors. But the ancestors of caroling would probably get you arrested today. The tradition evolved from wassailing, a rowdy, drunken procession rooted in agricultural magic and social extortion. The word comes from the Old English wes hall, meaning be whole or be healthy. Originally, this wasn't sung to people at all. It was sung to apple trees to scare away bad spirits and ensure a good cider harvest the following year. But the tradition migrated from the orchard to the street. In feudal England, bands of peasants would roam the streets visiting the homes of the wealthy lords. They would sing loud, boisterous songs demanding food and drink in exchange for blessing the house. Listen to the lyrics of We Wish You a Merry Christmas closely. Oh, bring us a figgy pudding. We won't go until we get some. That isn't a polite request, it's a threat. It was a socially sanctioned home invasion where the rich bought off the mob with booze and luxury food. If the lord refused, the wassailers might vandalize his property or curse his crops. It was a protection racket set to music. You paid the singers to ensure your luck and your windows remained intact. Once the mob has been fed and the house is quiet, we turn our attention to the fireplace, where an empty piece of footwear is waiting to be filled. Number 3. Christmas stockings. Hanging a sock by the chimney is objectively weird. It's the place where we dry wet clothes, not store candy. The standard explanation involves St. Nicholas tossing gold coins down a chimney, which landed in the drying stockings of 3 poor sisters, saving them from a life of destitution. It's a nice fable, but the mechanics of the tradition, leaving footwear out at night to be filled with treats, predates St. Nicholas by centuries. It leads us back to the frozen north and the 8-legged steed of the All-Father, Odin. During the Yule season, Nordic children would place their boots or wooden shoes near the chimney or the door. But they didn't leave them empty. They filled them with carrots, straw, or sugar for Sleipnir, Odin's legendary 8-legged flying horse. The belief was that as Odin led the wild hunt across the sky, he would stop to feed his mount. In gratitude for the snacks, the god would replace the hay with gifts, toys, and candies. When the church tried to Christianize the North, they couldn't stop the boot tradition, so they simply swapped the darker, one-eyed Odin for the benevolent St. Nicholas and the 8-legged horse for 8 reindeer. We're essentially leaving out gas money for a god's transportation in hopes of a kickback. We look to the hearth for gifts, but the ultimate symbol of the season requires us to look much higher, to a celestial event that changed history. Number 2. The Star of Bethlehem. Forget the serene image of 3 kings casually riding camels across a greeting card landscape. The journey of the Magi was likely a desperate, dangerous expedition undertaken by a group of obsessives. These weren't monarchs, they were Magi, Zoroastrian priest-astrologers from Babylon, who spent their lives decoding the mathematics of the night sky. They didn't leave the safety of their empire to chase a random shooting star or a vague feeling. In the ancient world, the sky was a clock, and the movements of the planets were the gears of history. They saw something in the darkness so mathematically improbable, so terrifyingly specific that they packed their bags and walked 1,000 miles into hostile Roman territory because they believed the architecture of the heavens had just shifted forever. For centuries, the church called it a miracle, and skeptics called it a myth. But in the early 17th century, the father of modern astronomy, Johannes Kepler, found the receipt. While studying a supernova, he calculated the planetary positions for the year 7 BC, the most historically probable year for the actual birth of Jesus. He discovered a rare triple conjunction. Jupiter, the king planet, and Saturn, the planet of the Jews and the protector of Israel, met each other 3 separate times within a span of months in the constellation of Pisces. To a Babylonian astrologer, this wasn't just a pretty light show. It was a sentence written in gravity. Jupiter, the king, is meeting Saturn, the shield of Judea, in Pisces, the sign of the end of the age. The message was unambiguous. A new king of the Jews is born to end the current era. Furthermore, the retrograde motion of the planets during this dance would have made them appear to stop or stand still in the southern sky, directly over Judea, just as the Gospel of Matthew describes. It wasn't a magical comet, which ancient cultures universally feared as a harbinger of doom. It was a precise, predictable, and incredibly rare cosmic alignment that had been ticking down since the formation of the solar system. The star wasn't a violation of the laws of nature, it was the ultimate expression of them. It suggests that the story of the Nativity isn't built on folklore, but on a real astronomical event that we can mathematically verify today. But this leads to a thought that is somehow more unsettling than magic. If the universe is a giant clock and the gears aligned perfectly to signal this specific moment in history, who or what wound the clock? But if the star was a real astronomical event that happened in the fall or spring, how on earth did we end up celebrating it in the dead of winter? Number 1. The date of Christmas, December 25th. We have reached the payoff, the singular day that stops the world. We picture the nativity scene, snow gently falling on the roof of the stable, the Holy Family huddled for warmth against the biting December wind. It is the most enduring image in Western history. It is also a complete fabrication. If you look at the text of the Bible with a historian's eye, the December date falls apart immediately. The Gospels mention shepherds abiding in the field, keeping watch over their flock by night. In Judea, December is the rainy, freezing season. By November, the sheep are locked away indoors to protect them from the cold. A December birth is logistically impossible. So if Jesus wasn't born in winter, why do billions of people freeze their way through the holiday? Because the early church didn't care about accuracy, they cared about domination. To understand Christmas, you have to look at the Roman calendar before the Christians got there. December 25th was the biggest day of the year. It was Dies Natalis Solis Invictus, the birthday of the unconquered sun. It celebrated the winter solstice, the moment the sun began to defeat the darkness and days started to grow longer. It was the climax of the festival of Saturnalia, a week of gambling, feasting, and gift-giving dedicated to the god Saturn. When the Emperor Constantine legalized Christianity in the 4th century, he faced a massive PR problem. The Roman populace loved their solar holidays. They weren't going to give up their feasts, their greenery, and the lighting of candles just because the state religion changed. So the church executed the most brilliant rebranding campaign in human history. They didn't cancel the party, they just changed the guest of honor. They took the festival of the sun and declared it the festival of the sun. They adopted the evergreen trees, the wreaths, the candles, and the feasting, and simply filed off the pagan serial numbers. It was a brilliant stroke of marketing. It allowed the pagan world to convert without losing their most cherished traditions. Christmas is not a rejection of the ancient world, it is a museum of it. But every light casts a shadow, and in the ancient world, you couldn't have the jolly gift giver without his terrifying counterpart.
Number 0, the bonus point, the Krampus. You know the drill. Be good, get toys. Be bad, get coal. It's a passive-aggressive threat that scares absolutely nobody. But in the shadowed valleys of the Austrian Alps, the consequences for being naughty were historically much more severe than receiving a dirty rock. Imagine it's the night of December 5th. You hear bells ringing in the darkness, but they aren't the cheerful, high-pitched jingle of a sleigh. They're the heavy, clanging cowbells of a beast approaching your front door. He has the gnarled horns of a goat, the matted fur of a sheep, one human foot and one cloven hoof. And that long, serpentine tongue lolling out of his mouth isn't for tasting snowflakes, it's for tasting fear. This isn't a modern horror movie villain. This is Santa's original business partner. Enter the Krampus. While St. Nicholas was the carrot, Krampus was the stick, literally. He carried a bundle of birch branches called rootin to whip children who didn't know their prayers or had misbehaved. But the true terror was the sack on his back, used to scoop up the worst offenders and drag them to the underworld, or at least to the nearest freezing river to be dunked. This wasn't just a bedtime story told to keep toddlers in line. It was a visceral, adrenaline-fueled event known as the Krampuslauf. For centuries, men would don terrifying, hand-carved wooden masks and heavy furs, drinking schnapps and storming through the streets to terrorize the community. Notice the rusty chains he wears? They aren't just for a spooky aesthetic. They symbolize the devil being bound by the power of the church. Yet, despite the Catholic Church's best efforts to ban him for being too demonic and the 1930s fascists trying to outlaw him for being socially deviant, the shadow of Saint Nick refused to die. We spent the last century sanitizing Christmas, turning it into a safe plastic holiday where everyone gets a prize, and the only danger is high cholesterol. But the recent global resurgence of Krampus parties suggests that we made a mistake. We realized that light has no meaning without the dark. The Krampus isn't just a monster. He is the necessary balance to the sweetness of the season. He is the ancient primal reminder that winter doesn't care if you've been good. It only cares if you survive. So, this year, when you're dragooned into wearing a scratchy sweater and drinking eggnog, don't roll your eyes. Look around. You're standing in the middle of a thousands-year-old ritual. You're the shaman, the Roman reveler, and the druid priest all rolled into one. History isn't in a book, it's in your living room. If you want to keep decoding the matrix of history with us, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. Think of it as your own digital church bell warding off the evil spirits of ignorance. And tell me in the comments, which of these pagan traditions are you definitely bringing up at the dinner table to annoy your relatives? I read every single one. Stay curious, stay odd, and I'll see you in the next one.